welcome to our presentation on educational metaphors, a comparison between American and British political speeches. This is a quick outline of what we will be presenting to you today. First, our literature review, then our research questions and hypotheses, followed by our method, results and discussion, then our conclusion and our references. I will start by giving a little background on our top research topic in relation to both metaphors in politics and metaphors in education. A lot of research has been done in the field of metaphor and politics. This has been done specifically on the use of metaphors and speeches on education. However, the following quote depicts the way in which metaphor can be used in an educational context. The simplest one with respect to education defines metaphor as seeing, describing, or interpreting some unfamiliar educational phenomenon, event, or action in terms of a familiar thing, event, or action. E.g., for example, teachers are guides, learning is an uphill battle. Education can thus be simplified in different terms, which makes the topic easier to understand for the listener. Metaphor is prevalent in many forms of communication, including both spoken and written discourse. Metaphors are highly evident in political speeches. Politicians use metaphors to characterize themselves, their opponents, and their political agendas. In previous research, it has been found that in political communication, metaphors involving war, conflict, and violence are particularly relevant. With regards to the topic of metaphor in politics in general, politics is seen to be too complex and abstract to be directly experienced. Thus, our world is one of creation, created by public communication. And it is also said that metaphors fit into the prevailing notions of information processing models of public knowledge of politics. Because of information processing demands, people cannot pay attention to all aspects of political evidence. Therefore, something is needed to simplify decision-making, and metaphor and other shortcut devices address this need. This gives an explanation for the use of metaphors in political discourse, and that it is used to simplify a certain topic in order for the listener to be able to understand the political issue being discussed, as was just mentioned with regards to the topic of education. Some of the most prominent forms of metaphor found in the articles were related to the education is war metaphor and education is a journey metaphor. Although these metaphors were found in both of the articles, they did not differ in their number, but also in the way that they were used. They not only differed in their number, but also in the way that they were used. Lakoff and Johnson give a possible explanation for the differences of metaphor use in different cultures, as perhaps the most neutral way of describing their difference, this difference between their culture and ours, would be to say that we have a discourse form structured in terms of battle, and they have one structured in terms of dance. This view indicates that difficult cultures will have different metaphors prevalent in their speeches. Our research questions include: what are the most common source domains identified in two political speeches on education? And how do the identified source domains differ when comparing the two speeches from the UK and the USA? Our hypotheses include that the political ideologies will differ in the two chosen speeches, and that there will be more than one theme present in each of the speeches. We also hypothesize that the most commonly used metaphor, argument is war, is expected to be present in the context of education as war, and that the basic conceptual metaphor love is a journey is expected to be present in the context of education is a journey.
Now I will present the methodology part. So we've chosen two political speeches from the two different countries, and the main criteria for this were to choose the speeches which would be from the same century and given by the politicians which had the same political status. Therefore, the first speech was produced by Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, and he's from America. And the second speech was produced by Education Secretary of State of Education, Nikki Morgan, and she's British. We applied metaphor identification procedure for identification of the metaphors. So first of all, we read the entire text to establish a general understanding. Then we determined those lexical units in the text which seem to be used in their metaphorical sense. Then we analyzed those lexical units. So first of all, we found their contextual meaning. Then we checked their basic meaning, and we used two dictionaries for that. The second is Oxford Learner Dictionary, and the second was Macmillan Dictionary. And actually, finally, we compared those contextual meanings with basic meanings. And the final point was to just identify whether this is metaphorical unit or not. Then we also, after that, we categorized and found all the source domains, the main target domains in our speeches were education, educational policy, or knowledge. So the first text was a bit longer. It had more than 4,000 words, and it included 53 metaphors. And then the second text had more than 3,000 words, and we found 30 metaphors, which had these three target domains. So the most common source domains identified in the metaphors were journey, road, war, and business. And we also found some secondary source domains, which were very interesting. So we had such conceptual metaphors as education is a tunnel, money, time, building, container, force, difficulty, picture, vehicle, even liquid or chemical reaction, as well as biological organism. And now Sophie is going to present this question.
In the results and discussion part, I'm going to talk about the most common source domains identified in the political speeches from the USA and the UK, and then I'm going to talk about the comparison of these two. As you can see, but before I start analysis, it is interesting that the first text included more various metaphors and the source domains than the second one. It was, as you can see, twice more. And more frequent metaphors were identified in both texts. In the first one, it was education is a journey, and in the second one, it was education is a road. And it is, and in the second text, it was education is a business and education is a war. It is very interesting that the first text included metaphors, education is a journey and education is a road, which we decided to merge because the first one, education is a journey, represents more general understanding of the metaphors, and the second one is more specific. And if you look at the metaphors itself, you will see that, for instance, the first one includes the crossroads or directions or responsibilities, whether the second one includes more specific path-related metaphors. And all of them include either path or just one. There is only one reference to a track. The second text was more interesting because the author of the text tried to convince the audience that education is something connected to a business, and that is why she uses all the business metaphors that she uses are connected to the partnership and the community. The context of these metaphors also tells us that she wants to convince people that education is a process where all the members of the community and the society are included into it. And then comes the education is a war. And in the first text, education is a war is a very, the war metaphors are very direct, and they are, as you can see, there are quite many. and also quite various as well. There are even verbs, for example, a verb fight, which is represented in with the two tense, and the other types of metaphors like beat the odds and defy, or fight, or educate the metaphors connected with the victory or defeat. However, the second text, the metaphors about the war are divided into two parts. The metaphors that the author uses to try to convince people that she wants to separate herself from the idea that education is a war, and that is why she is continuously repeating that she's not an ideological warrior, or she does not see the education as a battle or a war, or she wants, the idea that education policy is portrayed as a war is wrong. However, it is interesting that she somehow contradicts herself, because in the rest of the metaphors, she again uses war metaphors to show the education development processes. For example, she refers to national mission as she refers to the national mission metaphor to show that they should raise the level of quality of the education. Or she also uses, for instance, Call of Duty, or equipped to meet the challenges, and so on and so forth. And here we have a comparative analysis. This is a graph to show you the amount of the metaphors used in the first and the second text, and as you can see, it is very direct that the first text is about education is a war, whereas the second text includes less metaphors about war. The second text is more oriented on education is a business, whereas the first text does not include any metaphors about business. And then education is a journey metaphors are figurative in the first text and the very less in the second text. And the final part, the conclusion. So as we have guessed, it has met all the hypotheses that we have suggested in the beginning. The source domains in the first and the second political speeches differ, however there are some similarities and differences, and the political speech from the USA is more oriented on education as a journey and education is relevant metaphors, whereas the political speech from the UK is more oriented on the education is a war and education is a business metaphor. Here are the references, and thank you for your attention.